everybody can come back and review this to their heart's content. So, there probably are a few more people that will join us as we go, get through this. But let's get started with the June 27, 2024 RPC Transportation Advisory Committee. First on the agenda is introductions. So we'll go around the room, folks here in the room, and then we'll talk to the folks that are on Zoom with us today. So I'm Dave Walker, Assistant Director here at RPC.
David Gerard, I'm the Regional Planner at RPC.
Bob Diane, Commissioner from Greenland.
Chris Cross from Newton.
Steph Gizzo from Brentwood.
Larry O'Neill, East Kingston. Peter Tom Kingston. Brad Nichols Coast.
Right, and Scott is on vacation, so he won't be joining us here today. So we got Jack joining us. Let me admit him. All right, so let's start with Lucy online.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lucy St. John, New Hampshire DOT.
All right, morning Lucy, or afternoon, I should say. Danya.
Danya Sigley, Rye.
Danya. Joe.
Joel Lynch, Shauna Hampton.
All right, Eric.
Eric Eby, City of Portsmouth.
Eric. Jack.
Jack Wade, New Hampshire DES.
And then finally Amanda. All right. Amanda's the town planner with the town of Epping, right? And then maybe Jim, since you're just joining us, we're doing introductions, so.
Jim Lawmaker, Town of Houston.
All right, welcome, Jim. Okay. So first, the next item on the agenda is the minutes of the May meeting.
I move that we accept the minutes as written. Second.
Brad, any discussion on that? Comments, questions from anyone? Hearing nothing, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed or abstaining?
Okay, I was not here.
All right, so Jim,
Abstain.
And Danya.
that was done, yeah, okay. Lucy,
And Danya.
are you both abstaining from that? Both Lucy and Danya abstaining for the minutes? Okay, all right. All right. Okay, well, that was very quick, thank you. All right, next item is Amendment 6, which I know you've all been waiting for. Assuming I can find things in my folder here, I will be sharing a presentation. So, let's see. Can those of you on Zoom see the Amendment 6 presentation? Excellent. Okay, so. See something in the chat. All right, no worries, Amanda, on the getting the phone call, I understand. All right, so tip Amendment 6, this is the again, 6th amendment that we've done to the 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program. This is actually, I think, the 4th amendment we've handled this year since January, maybe the third or 4th time. So often these are quarterly, but it seems like they've been coming fast and furious this year. This will be the last amendment that we do to the 2023 to 2026 TIP, as DOT is closing off amendments as they start to prepare to do the what we call the TIP and the STIP update, which is when we'll have the 25 to 28 transportation improvement program. So this amendment consists of 8 projects that we have to deal with. 4 of those are regional projects and 4 of them are part of statewide programs. We're starting a public comment period tomorrow. Assuming I can get my act together and get the notice out. which I kind of need to do. And that will conclude, that's a 10-day comment period, will conclude the day before the commission, the July commission meeting.
We have someone in the waiting room.
Oh,
Sorry.
thanks. Oh, Lee driving fashionably late. Thanks for pointing that out. So as we haven't really started the comment period yet, we haven't received any comments on any changes that are being proposed. And again, we'll be having a public hearing at commission meeting on July 10th. And I do not know where that's going to be held yet, but that will be nailed down as part of putting out a public notice for the changes. So there's one new project being added. This is a statewide program, the overhead sign rehab program. This is a program that has come and gone for the TIP occasionally. It's not entirely new, but it is new to the TIP. And basically it's DOT's holding pot for projects where they are working on particular overhead sign structures on the highway system. It's adding $2 million to the TIP. And overall, it's a $10 million program, the state. So this is good.
Question about that?
Sure.
Sorry. Is that $2 million per year? And is that a regular thing or for every
It's,
year?
I believe,
There's 2 months, doesn't equal 10.
no, that, I mean, when I talk about overall project costs, it usually will include years that extend beyond the 2023 to 2026. A lot of these projects continue out beyond that. Yeah, so this has $1 million each in 2025 and 2026. And so I'm guessing it'll be $1 million out to 2030 time frame, however long it takes to get to 10. So maybe 2034. So, yeah, sure. Any other questions on it? Yeah.
Yes, this question is really for Lucy and the DOT, and that is this new project. Specifically where I-95 exit 4 begins the Spalding Turnpike. There's an unused bridge that enters the old Peace Air Force Base that's never been connected. And there is a prominent DOT trailer placed on that says a good message, move over, clear the road, just a reminder on that. Is this OHSS project going to replace the trailer with an overhead sign in situations like that? Or are we going to see this old dilapidated trailer with a nicely painted sign on one side?
This is Lucy St. John. I don't know the specific answer to that question, but I would anticipate that this is really about the signage, but I can look into that and get back with Dave. So you're talking about a trailer that's at I-95, and where was the other location? I didn't hear all of that.
It's the intersection, it's where the Spalding Turnpike starts at I-95 exit 4, you make a left exit to start I-95, and you go under this bridge that's been there for 70 years, never used because of the poor location. But there's this trailer I've noticed several years ago on it, and it's a good message. It reminds everybody to move right when there's emergency vehicles on there, but it looks like it's something I would expect. Can I say this in the state of Maine, upstate Maine, and New Hampshire? I'm going to hear comments about that, I'm sure. But I just wondered if OHSS might replace that with a nice overhead sign that does the same thing. So,
I will make some inquiries and get back with Dave. I don't know the status of what they intend to do with that trailer, but the signage program is basically to replace the overhead signage.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sounds like it could possibly be part of that, but also the description tells me it's replacement or rehab of existing structures.
Right.
So.
This is a mobile existing
Sort of,
structure.
it's not really an existing overhead structure, but.
Thanks. Just a
So-
little side. Thank you.
Okay, sure. All right. Next up are projects that are showing scope changes only. These are just basically changes to the description as it's listed in the tip. Mostly these are just clarifications, and not like the scope of the project itself isn't changing, the description is changing. So for this Londonderry Wyndham Seabrook project that's working on signal coordination type stuff. The scope was somehow blanked out at some in the past in the state's database, so they're correcting that by putting the actual scope in it. And here I put the scope up on on this in this right column, so the actual scope will show up there. So that's implementing improvements on 3 signalized corridors in Londonderry, Wyndham, and Seabrook. Plastow 40641, this is the Main Street traffic calming project in Plastow. And basically the change is in the description to change it from TC to be traffic calm. So it's a little more, slightly more descriptive, right? I know DOT in the database description, these are limited to 110 characters, so you often see shorthand and acronyms and missing vowels and words and that kind of thing. So limited a little bit on that. And the traffic monitoring programmatic is actually being made a lot more descriptive to talk about what exactly is happening there in terms of the traffic data collection. Any questions on those? Great. And finally, there are 4 projects that have funding and or schedule changes. We have the Greenland engineering assessment that's occurring at the Winnicott Bayside Bridge. That's adding some funding to that, adding $95,000 to that, and shifting the timing from 2024, fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25. Northampton 24457. This is a replacement of the bridge over the Peanut Railroad in Northampton on Route 1. That is shifting construction out to 2027, so it's actually dropping construction out of the tip. So that's getting delayed a bit. And that's why there's the large decrease in funding. The pavement resurfacing program for the tier 2 roadways, that is adding $31 million to further pave additional roads and miles of road. And so basically that's just showing increased funding to fund the sub projects that sit within that program.
When you say increased funding, that 31 million became available from the funding source.
That funding is coming from somewhere else, so it's either additional federal funds were found, or they've reallocated funding from other programs or other projects based on availability. And occasionally, projects will get delayed. And so it may be not one that's, in our region. And so it frees up federal funding, and one of the easiest ways for DOT to reprogram that funds is to put it into paving.
So this could be part of the annual reprogramming at the.
Yeah.
3/4 mark.
Right, yeah, exactly. So, and then the final project that's having, this is a funding change, is this STBG to FTA transfer. This is, I don't know, I guess it was a year or 2 ago now, DOT committed to transferring some federal highways, block grant funding to the FTA to help support transit around the state. And so this is actually reflecting that. So that money is leaving the STBG program, and it's actually appearing in National Transit System, their programs this year, I think. And so that's why we don't see it in our region. But anyway, so it's dropping that program by $3.6 million, but that money isn't disappearing. It's actually just going to transit projects and being funded and showing up as transit funding. So
is the STBG also looking at money from our community block grants from our?
no. So this is the STBG is the federal sort of block grant. That's the most flexible funding that DOT gets from the federal government for transportation projects, and it can be utilized most anywhere in the program. So, but yeah, and the block grant that the towns get, that's state money that comes from the fuel tax. And that gets distributed, a certain percentage of that gets distributed to each of the communities, yeah.
And so we get some of that.
You're getting some of that too.
We don't spell it out the same way as Nashua does.
Okay, and that's why it's showing up in the, so Nashua MPO has that included in their amendment, because Nashua lists it differently than coastal.
Yeah.
So. All right,
That gets spread across the state.
okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was targeted to individual agencies at different times, so.
Just a point on the abbreviations. That nice list of abbreviations they always include with
Yep.
these changes. It doesn't include ST, BG. I looked that up on mine for the
Okay.
document, and it was useful. It told me all the different things it could be used for, you know.
Okay.
USA highway,
I'll double check
plus
that.
pedestrian and bikes and.
Yeah, it doesn't, yeah, it's there, it just doesn't actually tell you what STBG stands for.
Yeah, exactly, which is kind of the purpose of it.
Why would I be helpful like?
Oh, it's listed 4 times, yeah.
Yeah.
Over 20 and all that. stuff.
Yeah, because it's broken into a bunch of different pots based on the size of the urban area
Right.
and a few other reasons. And so, yeah, I don't actually explicitly spell out what that STBG stands for. And I probably could do that with a handful of the projects, of the programs here to actually spell them out to what it is. So I'll keep that in mind for, you know, next time I update it.
I can figure out over 2 million, you know, or whatever.
Right.
But it's the 4-letter abbreviations.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. That's pretty much all we do here at transportation. Yeah, does anybody have any questions about the changes to these 4 products?
I didn't. Yeah, oh, Crystal, let's go first.
Okay.
That's true. Just, I don't know if you're on this, tier 2 roads resurfacing. How does that relate to the child project needs program?
So the statewide programmatics, which this tier 2 research program is. DOT is allowed to group a bunch of smaller projects under the umbrella of the larger state program, right? For efficiency, so that they don't have 20 or 30 different paving contracts essentially listed in the tip individually, and that's what this is. And so each of the child projects is essentially a paving contract that's given out to do a certain road or a certain set of roads around the state. So, and they're on the tier 2 system in the state, which the state has a 5-tier system. Let's say 5 tiers. Tier 2 would be sort of the step down from the major state highways. So it's not the interstates, it's not 101. It's probably not Route 4 or 125. It's probably that sort of next level down of state highways, like 121A or something like that, you know. The state does have on their website somewhere maps that show what each is involved in each of the tiers. And we can find that information and send that out. Kayla, can you help me remember that?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
What am I supposed to help you remember? No.
Great. You're supposed to be a fast.
Oh,
yeah, that's right, Bob. Sorry.
Greenland feels the need for the engineering assessment of the Winnipeg River Bridge is urgent. And this delay is a setback to our interest into an extension of our current safety risks. Is there anything that can be done to complete the engineering assessment sooner?
I mean, that's a question for DOT, probably, but given that we're almost at the end of fiscal year 24. That's probably, you know, the need to move that money to fiscal year 25 is probably more of an administrative need than an indication of any sort of change in schedule from DOT at this point.
Maybe it could become the first thing in 25 instead of the last thing in 24.
Right?
But on that, just been thinking about tools in our toolbox for advancing things through the NEPA process. Is there any opportunities maybe for like a PEL, planning and environmental linkages approach, where you have several collaborating agencies like a DES or that would be something to look into with those cross discussion ways?
Yeah. I do know that this DES will be heavily involved in the development of this engineering study simply because it's very much focused around the needs of the river that are right there. So
So it's, sorry,
go ahead.
has this
Right.
gone up? So it's not gone up a bit? or-
No, and right, yeah,
So realistically, there's no way that you can get a contract in place by the end of fiscal year '24 anyways.
probably not. I would guess they have assigned a project manager now, I believe. But that's the last that I've heard of any, what's going on with that project.
So that doesn't mean they couldn't put the solicitation out sometime in the summer. It's just when they sign the contract.
Right.
Hopefully in the very beginning of '25.
Right,
So October, first of October.
that would be ideal, I think,
Yeah.
yeah. But I don't know exactly what the advertisement schedule is for that,
Yeah.
so I'd have to look that up.
Follow-up. $95,000, does that increase in funding represent inflation?
I would say not. I would say that's
That seems too much for inflation.
yeah, inflation would be, a few $1,000s because you're only inflating 1 year. Right, so you would be at 3.7%, it'd be $5,000, $10,000 maybe. So I would say this is more than that. This is probably the project manager making an assessment that additional funding would be needed to complete the work as described or anticipated.
Is there a possibility that it's a change in scope?
I haven't seen anything that said it's a change in scope. And we didn't see a change in the scope description for this project.
But you did mention, yes, forget what you said, undoubtedly maybe be involved.
BES will definitely be involved with this because there is an opportunity potentially to have the work, or at least some of the work funded through coastal infrastructure grant that BES would get to basically improve the movement of aquatic species in the Winnipeg River. And so that's a distinct possibility to do the work on the bridge, because my understanding is that the bridge potentially would need to be lengthened in order to facilitate that. And if that's the case, then there would be some funding coming through that program, their programs to potentially facilitate that. But that's all, I think, speculation, and at this point, it's all based on, the outcome of the engineering study is going to determine what's needed and hopefully give us some direction as to how it might be funded and the timeframes in which it might be funded in.
Sorry for my series of questions.
No, that's all right.
What will be the output of the engineering study when it does come out?
That is a great question. I do not know the answer to that.
Is there an example of a previous engineering study that could be looked at to kind of get a guess at what that might be?
That's a good question. I don't know if Lucy, if you have any thoughts on that. I'm trying to think of a comparable kind of project.
Just one comes to mind.
Yeah, the two I can think of are much smaller scale. There's Lock Road, there's a culvert on 1A in Rye, just north of Lock Road, that is sort of being replaced, and kind of in concert working with Department of Environmental Services as well. But that's a much smaller scale project. And same thing on Squamscott Road in Stratton. There's a similar kind of tidal culvert that's being worked on. But again, very much smaller scale, but it might be a model for kind of what's happening in Greenland.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's something to look into as well, if that's. Try to find some examples of engineering that makes sense.
yeah, I'll look for that too. So, okay. Any further questions on these 4 projects? Okay. As always with TIP amendments, we need to talk about fiscal constraint and air quality conformity. And the air quality conformity is rather straightforward in that we don't really need to deal with it. We basically restate that we've done an analysis on this previously, and we're relying on that previous analysis because we're essentially in attainment, so we don't really need to deal with it. It's really more of a paperwork kind of thing, and just making sure that we incorporate that sort of language into our TIP and the changes. DOT provided fiscal constraint tables, and those were attached to what was sent out to everyone and are in your packet here on the table, of course, as well. They maintain that fiscal constraint is maintained in that, in other words, that we are not spending more money than we have available in the state to facilitate these projects. Overall, the net funding change in the TIP for our region is 25 point, almost $4 million. Largely that is that paving program, the increase in that paving program. So it's, you know, the how we handle the fiscal constraint is a little bit complicated. But we rely a lot on DOT to basically say that yes, they're keeping the state constrained. So any questions on that? Larry, I imagine being new to this is kind of all Greek to you. But-
I'm getting part of it.
Yeah, no, that's all right. There's a lot of, you know, this is a regular kind of thing that we talk about at these meetings, and so you'll see it fairly frequently. If you have any questions about any acronyms or anything that I'm saying, just don't be afraid to speak up, because get used to people being sort of understanding what I'm talking about without really having to explain in any great detail. So if there's any questions, and that goes to any of the folks on Zoom as well, any questions, feel free to speak up. So the gist of it is that we are constrained. We've got a handful of projects that are changing. We don't need to deal with it or falling apart. So if there aren't any additional questions, and
Just say that the public comment period not having, that only affects, they're gonna vote on.
they'll vote at it. Yeah, they'll vote at it after.
We're agreeing with it, sorry, and, just moving it on to the MPO.
Yeah.
So I would, move that the RPC Transportation Advisory Committee endorse the changes included in amendment number 6 and recommend approval to the MPO Policy Committee.
All right. You got a second that, Brad? All right, thanks. Okay, any comments, any questions, Brad?
Yes, so are any of these changes related to the 10-year plan that was passed? Which I'm not sure of the status of, or whether or not that's actually been signed by the governor at this point.
Don't believe any of these changes are related to the 10-year plan that was back.
There was a comment that the 10-year plan was being amended to.
Amend the long-range transportation plan. Yeah. Yeah, so the MPO, we have the long-range transportation plan, which is our, looking out to 2045 at this point. So projects listed in that document have to be consistent with how they're listed in the transportation improvement program. So anytime we change a project in the TIP, we are sort of by default changing the project in the long-range plan. So we amend them at the same time. So
Do we know this?
I don't know the status. Lucy, do you know if the 10-year plan has been signed by the governor?
Lucy St. John, my understanding it's been sent there, but I don't believe it's been signed yet. So as soon as we know, we could certainly let you know.
Okay, all right, thanks. So, yeah, and as far as I know, none of these changes are related to the 10-year plan in any way, so. Any other questions or comments before we take a vote?
Yeah, just for clarity for me, I thought that the 10-year plan must have been signed already, or it couldn't be implemented. So the next part of it is I'm always getting these fiscal year stuff because they never end when they're supposed to. So which 10-year plan is not yet signed?
So it would be the 25 to 34 10-year plan,
Which starts July 1.
July 1, yeah, so it's,
July,
yeah,
started October 1.
well, that's the federal. So there's a federal fiscal year and a state fiscal year. State fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th. Federal fiscal year is October 1st to September 30th. We have to kind of straddle both of those sometimes, like for budgeting purposes, we have a July to June fiscal year, but when we're dealing with the TIP and things like that, we talked about, and anytime we're dealing with federal funds, we're talking about the federal fiscal year.
Okay, so the one we just talked about is the 25 to 34 10-year plan.
Correct. Yes.
Ready for the governor and everything.
Yeah, and he should be signing it sort of imminently here because he has, by law, he has X number of days after the legislature approves it to sign it. I want to say it's 30 days or 60 days or something, but usually it's signed somewhere midsummer. And then what will happen is DOT will take that and immediately take the first 4 years and start building the next step. So the state transportation improvement program, the next 4-year document, so for that, so. They have to wait though until governor signs it before they do really much. So, okay, any further comments or questions from those folks that are on Zoom? All right, hearing none, I'm going to move forward for the vote. So all in favor of endorsing TIP Amendment 6 and moving it on to the policy committee, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none. Excellent, thank you. All right. So I am going to stop the share on this. And, okay, so continuing with Dave talking. I'm gonna get into the 2025 project selection process and setting our draft 10-year plan priorities. So this is for the next 10-year plan. Excuse me, this is the 27 to 36 10-year plan that we're kind of talking about now. So before DOT's even approved the 25 to 34, we're talking about the 27 to 36, yes.
So just to think about that, I was curious, would it be helpful if we had maybe like a calendar or tap of like, this is when this federal year starts and ends, we could have highlighted, maybe like this deadline for this amendments, what we had.
That would be helpful for me. Yeah.
Maybe just a place that people know if it's a
Yeah.
federal fiscal year deadline or if it's a state or. this
No,
is
I-
approved, that would be something.
I think, having something on the wall for us, when deadlines would be, since we meet in this room pretty much exclusively, it would probably be really helpful.
Put that on my ideas list.
All right, thanks, Michaela. All right, so I am going to bring up another presentation. Maybe. Let's get rid of that one. Okay. Share the screen one more time. All right, I'm going to assume that folks on Zoom can now see that. That technology hasn't failed me between the tip and this. Oh, 10 more. So Larry, again, this is probably something that's going to be a little bit confusing to you since you're coming in at sort of the middle end of this process, but feel free to speak up with any questions you might have. It goes for anybody, of course. But, so we are in the midst of the product solicitation and prioritization process for the next state 10-year plan. This again is the 2027 to 36 10-year plan, which you know, we're sort of step one. Our prioritization process is step one of DOT's building of that next 10-year plan. And because of the timeframes involved and when we have to have information to DOT to say what our priorities are, we have to start well before they approve what will be the current 10-year plan here in maybe a week or two. So it's an early process, long process. It takes us about almost a year to kind of get through it. We've been making really great progress this spring. And then as we get through this today, the results of today will go to our engineering consultants and they'll spend the summer working on putting together estimates on the projects that we put forward. And then we'll come back together in the fall and talk about how do we take the information we have and come up with a constrained list of priorities to submit to DOT. So.
David,
Yeah,
this is Danya Sigley. Could you just confirm the dates of that future 10-year plan again?
it's so the projects that we're prioritizing would be the region's priorities for the 2027 to 2036 10-year plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So Oh, I forgot to update a date there. November 11th, 2022 was when we had to submit projects in the last round. So we haven't received an exact date, but I would expect it will be somewhere around November 11th, 2024. Somewhere around the end of that week. We will, I copied this over yesterday at the last minute, this one slide, and of course it had all these non-updated dates on it. So we have to have our priorities to New Hampshire DOT by March of next year. So March 2025 and March, that's by law, and as part of the statutes. And DOT is required to produce a draft tenure plan by July of next summer. Right? And so then it goes to, well, July 1st, 2025 is the next one, so. So these the timeframes on the bottom, those are kind of, those are appropriate. We're actually a little bit ahead this year. Typically, I try to get this where we're at now today, try to have that done by July, but I'm actually running ahead of things a little bit, which I'm excited about because that actually gives us lots of time to have the engineers take a look at projects. And so what we'll do is we'll approve a list of projects to send to the engineering team today. And we'll actually talk about it at the commission meeting, the RPC meeting in July as well. But you know, you all are the group that sort of make the call on this. And then the engineers will work on this over the summer, and then we'll come back hopefully in the September meeting, but it could possibly be the October meeting to talk about narrowing that list of priorities down to what DOT needs from us. So, God, I copied this one over too, and I forgot to update it. Sorry about that. So there's some incorrect information on this. So first bullet is of course correct. We're adding construction phases for the 10-year plan that will be programmed in the last 2 years. So they would be programmed in like 2035 and 2036 of the next 10-year plan. Our target funding for the region, however, is not $6.6 million, it's $8.1 million. They updated that in the last round. And I did a poor job of updating my slide. Costs must include inflation and indirect costs. The inflation rate, however, is 3.7%, not 2.8%. We still do include 10% indirect costs, although I've heard some rumblings that that percentage might be increasing as well. We haven't seen anything official about it, but there's been some discussions that it might be going up. We use a common set of project selection criteria that all of the RPCs, all 9 RPCs use. We do tailor them each to our particular region in terms of how we weight those criteria. And we spent a lot of time at the last meeting discussing that and coming up with our current scheme. All projects must go through an engineering and cost review before they can be submitted to DOT in November. DOT does allow us to submit up to that $8.1 million worth of projects, plus an additional 2 projects, basically as alternates. So we try to maximize what we could get DOT to review for us out of that. And then one thing DOT has committed as part of the 10-year plan process is that when we set a priority as a region or priorities as a region, DOT will put that into the draft 10-year plan as submitted. It doesn't guarantee that that's going to make it through what is inherently a very political process, going through both the governor's council and the legislature and as well as the governor. There's always an opportunity for projects to get dropped out due to some political conflict. But so far, things, when we've set a priority, people have been very respectful of that and not asked to have anything removed. So, and as I said, that political process, anything we put as a priority still has to go through that GATT process. So all those public hearings will happen next fall. Those are not this fall, but next fall. Those are political and anything can kind of happen in the horse trading and the work behind the scenes that happens to get these things approved at the political level. So, is this a little bit because it's in the way? So, I'm sorry. I think part of the problem here is I maybe this is the wrong. This is the presentation. Oh, man. All right. I didn't save the wrong one. Oh, wait, here we are. See if this is the right one. Hey, there we are. Look at that. All right. All right, so I'm going to share a different presentation that is actually the correct one. At least I hope it is. I'm not making any guarantees at this point. Okay, so. Yeah, because I was like, this is not familiar to me. Why is this? I swear I did different things. My goals today for you were to sort of understand the criteria weighting process that we did last time. Making sure you understand how I scored the projects, and then coming up with that list of priorities to get the estimates done. And then, you know, we're on step 4 of this process that we talked about previously. Getting towards the end of our initial work as part of the 10-year plan. So we're trying to create that short list of priorities. And then I have the appropriate slide with the appropriate timeframes on it. So you know, we're at the TAC meeting in June, so I'm running, like I said, a little ahead of schedule, but that's actually good, and I'm liking that. Next steps are to send it to the engineering team and start discussions with DOT about making sure that their understanding of the scopes of these projects is the same as our understanding of it, so we don't get any conflict on that side of things.
POL stands for.
Policy committee, so that's the full commission.
Yeah.
Plus DOT and Coast and other entities like that. Yeah, so it's the NPO. So now that I'm on the right presentation, just kind of overview of, you know, we're all familiar, many of you are familiar with the fact that we break projects into 3 groups: the local, the regional, and the interregional, right? The reasoning for that is essentially to ensure that many different types of projects have the opportunity to get looked at and scored and prioritized. And often, if you have very big, expansive projects, those tend to score the best overall and would sort of dominate the field. So we break them up into these smaller groups to try to give opportunity for some of these smaller projects to get heard and seen and potentially programmed. But we do have kind of different focus for each of those types of these groups of projects based on the scale of the project. And so, you know, a local project on Main Street is going to have a very different focus from a project that's on, say, 101 or I-95. One is going to focus on mobility and getting people from place to place more efficiently and faster. The other might be focused more on safety or improving access for pedestrians or that sort of thing. So we do get some different types of projects. And this kind of helps to ensure that we get to talk about all of them. So last meeting, we spent a couple of hours basically debating how we were going to weight each of the criteria and the categories of criteria that we have. You know, let's talk about safety and mobility, roadway condition, those types of things. And so we went through that whole process last time of making sure that, well, many of you were happy with the distribution of those weights and what percentage each would of the score each would have. And so all those categories are summed up so that the total equals 100% of the project score for each project. And at the last meeting, you all had done a survey ahead of time to fill out what your priorities are and how each should be weighted. And we discussed that at the meeting and came up with some adjusted values for everything. And that is what we're showing here. So I'm not going to go through each of these individually, but just as an example, for each category of project, the percentage weight for each of these 8 areas that we look at in terms of selection criteria are slightly different. So for economic development, when we're talking about local scale projects, that's 12% of the score. For regional scale projects, it's 9%. And for interregional projects, it's 12% again. And that was based on the outcome of the discussions at the meeting where we did adjust some of these. And then underneath each, there's a couple of considerations that we include. So under economic development, we included, you know, this sort of accessibility issues. So is the project improving access to an activity area or to, you know, employment or to housing or something like that? And we also looked at goods movement. So does it reduce a freight bottleneck or otherwise improve the freight network. And so under each, so under that economic development, 50% of the score is going to be based on the accessibility part of it, and 43% of the score is based on freight movement. So for each of the projects, they're assigned a score for each of these, and that is summed up and weighted at the end. And so, so I did that for all 117 projects that we're looking at. And
Plus you.
yeah, a lot of it is automated to some degree, so I just have to update the values that we use for the weights. And that does a good chunk of it for me. And so in the project selection process, we look at a couple of different pieces of this. First is the scoring. We look at available information on projects, crash history, what the cost is that's been identified so far. We look at, pavement condition data. We look at travel time, reliability, indexes and things like that. So we're looking at it, and then traffic volume, all these different pieces of things. And so that gives me the data that I need to do the scoring. And that's really the starting point, though. Because there's so many projects, it's not something that we can have the TAC do the scoring for everything. So I use, basically myself as the, establishing that initial list of priorities. And then we had a discussion here at this meeting to talk about, okay, of these things that have floated to the top in the scoring process, what makes sense for us to put forward? So.
I have a quick sort of question / comment for you. I don't know if anyone else in the room submitted any new projects in this last round or was involved in that process, but I understand you have so many projects to go through, you're trying to keep the content limited, but I found it difficult with the character limits to actually convey all the information I wanted to convey. You could only put in like 1 or 2 sentences for
Okay.
each thing, and I was like, there's key information that I can't squeeze into this response.
Yeah, okay, I didn't realize that was a limitation, but you always can feel free to send.
I was doing it at the last minute, so that's on me. If
No,
I had
that's
done it
okay.
sooner, I
And-
could have given you
And
that feedback.
I will say for next iteration, we're gonna have an entirely new system in
Mhm.
place. We're working on contracting with a software as a service agency that will give us tip management capabilities. So, these tip amendments, that sort of stuff, it'll be kind of helping automate that process and managing all those tip projects. But it also allows us to do our product solicitation through that.
Mhm.
It should all be hopefully a lot more functional than what we put together so far, and we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll hopefully test it out.
Hopefully
Test it out ahead
Start
of
sooner next time.
So you're being replaced by AI.
to some degree. As I approach retirement, I'm less and less concerned about that. So in the end, it's the TAC that kind of makes the decision about when we move forward, although I do establish a short list from you all to choose from. So projects are scored based on our understanding of what the proposed scope is and the updated, any sort of data we have available. Some of that for some projects is very general and nebulous, and so it makes it more challenging to make decisions about that. But we do the best we can. There are 8 project selection criteria areas, right? It's really challenging for projects to sort of touch on all of those. And so what happens is you have a safety project, or you have, say, a freight project like you need to put forward. It hits really well on the freight pieces of it and the roadway condition pieces, because they're proposing to reconstruct a road, so it's going to be in much better condition. It'll help the freight network in that area, so it hits really well there, but it doesn't really do anything for the other 6 criteria in many cases. And so most of our projects we find are scoring somewhere in the 40 to 50 point range out of 100. Which, when you think about it, that's not terribly shocking, but it's a little disheartening to see your top project have like 52 points. It's, but, so as we move forward, and this is sort of an aside, I'd love to figure out a way that we can focus things a little down a little further, and maybe see if we can't get down to 5 or 6 criteria. And combine some of these or do something just to kind of make it a little more efficient and maybe, I don't know, it's a little bit of an aside. So, when, looking at those local projects, as I said, they tend to not score quite as well against some of the bigger projects. And you can see, the average score on those little projects was a 31 versus a 42 for the interregional project. So we get a little bit of disparity there in scoring.
Okay, question.
No,
We've talked about this in the past, that I recall, and that is, are the mean numbers brought forward to the state from all the regions so that we identify bias in that a particular region is not super scoring all others in the 80 and 90 range as opposed to?
we're not really competing against the other regions for this, so we don't.
Because the funds have been targeted.
Right, each of the region has a target amount that they're proposing for the 10-year plan.
Right.
And we can vary a little bit from that, sometimes a little over, sometimes a little under. But we don't have to compete against, say, Manchester region, Southern New Hampshire or Stratford for those funds. So there's not, the scoring doesn't, and DOT will see the scoring to some degree, but they're really more interested in what our priorities are, not what they exactly scored, because we're all doing it slightly differently too, so.
Second question is, do you have a listing of the spread, the highest of all the projects? There's a 1.1 and 2.9 to show that they're not all clustered in the center and that there's really not much difference in.
Yeah, I don't usually publish that, but I can, there's very few projects that are, getting single digits. It's probably, in the 20s to in the 50s kind of thing.
Insulted anyone.
Well, there's a bit.
Every project has merit.
Yes, exactly.
And it's,
Yeah, and we've been pretty, I don't know what the right word is, stringent about kind of getting rid of projects in our long range plan that don't seem to have any support from the community or haven't been talked about in 20 years, that kind of thing. So if we're not hearing from a community that it remains important, we're basically saying, okay, well, we're gonna set this to the side and, drop it out of the plan since it's not sort of taking up space kind of thing. So, and I've been pretty tough on projects in the past, but we try to every cycle, I try to look through it. Is there something that we can drop out or get rid of? In this case, I didn't drop anything out. I did combine some projects. Particularly the Ocean Boulevard projects in Hampton Beach. I had listed about 6 or 7 different phases to that Ocean Boulevard project. But the way that the project has been moving forward, DOT has broken it into 3 phases. And so I changed our project listing in here to match those 3 phases. So that, that's the kind of thing that I try to do when I can, so.
Well, also you on the 1B project from the Portsmouth traffic circle up to the Sarah Long Bridge, you made a mention that it's hasn't shown much support and the cost estimates have gone up.
Yeah, I mean, those 2 projects have been in our long range plan for a long time. They're based on a 2000 era traffic study that was done. And I haven't heard anybody clamoring to have the bypass rehabilitated and reconstructed. So they floated to the top because they hit enough of the buttons on that interregional scale to make it there. But I don't see anybody really clamoring for that. The traffic circle, yes, we hear about that a lot.
I'm not talking about the 1B section.
Yeah, no, we're talking about there's the north and south segments that sort of independent of the traffic circle. DOT had rebuilt the bridges over the last probably 15 years. Specifically with the idea of eventually needing to reconstruct the bypass and addressing some of the safety and operational issues that have there because of the design is now, 50 or 60 years old. But I haven't heard anybody clamoring for that kind of improvement, and it's a really big, expensive project, so I don't see it as necessarily being a regional priority, given that, it's not, it's not a huge safety issue, it's not a huge congestion issue at this time, so things like that, but they made it to near the top enough to be considered.
For a second there too, like, what we see in some of the communities is the fact that the project takes so long, from the time we're starting, or the inception of the project, to when it actually gets programmed in, and
Right.
I mean, it's not that we still don't have support for it, it's that it kind of falls off the radar in the community.
Yeah.
And it's, even if we had some kind of coordination at the state level with our representatives, who could then bring that information back to our community leaders.
Yep.
It's almost like it's just dropping right up, nobody knows the status.
Right, and that's, that is a part of the struggle with the 10-year plan and having projects that are more locally focused than state focused, is that a project gets in the 10-year plan and then really nothing happens for 5 or 6 years. And so you have a whole new board of select board, whole new planning board, new staff in the communities, and sometimes communities are just surprised, like, where did this project come from? We try to minimize that when we can, that surprise, but it does happen. So it's something we have to kind of wrestle with, and that's why we're, when projects are put forward for the 10-year plan by a community, we want to make sure it's something that they recognize it's a long way out. You're gonna be, if you get the project added, it's going to be a while before you actually see any construction on it. Occasionally that things happen very quickly. But usually if something has happened very quickly, there's some money being thrown around from the community to facilitate something happening very fast. So, for instance, the last one I remember was in Seabrook, the bridge over I-95 on 107. There was several $1 million worth of developer funds that were available to kind of facilitate that project happening on a much quicker time frame than you would typically see. Saw it happen in Epping on 125. When the Walmart went in, there was some work that happened there very quickly because, the developer threw a few $1 million of mitigation costs at it. And so DOT was like, yeah, sure, we'll do that now. So.
We have 2 raised hands, Mark.
Oh, Mark, yeah.
Person, yes.
So there's a interchange, it's kind of where the 4 towns meet, this is exit 12 off 101. And it's mostly an Exeter, part of it's in Hampton, and then Northampton's right here, Stratham, the industrial park is here. So it's one of those weird situations where like, it's on the fringe of 4 different towns, and none of it's in Stratham. But the issue with this intersection is it's a stop, so you go to the end of the interchange and there's stop signs. So I drive this every morning, and not every morning, but probably Tuesday through Thursday, the traffic is so bad now, the cars line up to the end of the travel lane, so they're getting to the travel lane. And I tried to advance this, but I didn't feel like Stratham could sponsor this, because not in our community, none of the interchanges in our town. And I just don't think that the solicitation process is reasonable to get 4 towns to support the project and get us like board to. But it's a little frustrating that I feel like this is one of the major needs in the region that keeps getting not included.
Yeah, and we're aware of that project. Exit 9 on 101 gets a similar to exit 12, similar kind of effect at different times of day. So we've sort of pushed that forward, trying to get a corridor study to look at the 101 unsignalized interchanges in the region, because they are, they've experienced such growth over the years that they're starting to struggle a bit. We're trying to figure out how to get that moving forward to some degree.
Is there like another grant program or something that?
I'm not sure. DOT does have a corridor study program. I would say that this probably isn't their priority. Because they're focused, and I believe it's Gasset that will make the decision about which corridor studies are done, and they're doing that statewide. So we have to kind of work within that process. At the same time, you know, we're not ignoring that. I did add that those two interchanges, 9 and 12, into our project list. They just didn't float to the top. And some of that is just me lacking information about them at this point, but we'll get them into the cycle and we'll start seeing more about them as we move forward.
I talked to Dave Sharples and he said they might be interested, but it's a process. And
Right.
Yeah.
So I added them into our project list, so they'll show up in a long range plan now as projects, with sort of a nebulous. We aren't quite sure what we need here, and that's the hard thing is like, yeah, we could signalize it, it could be, you know, standard double set of signals, it could be a single point urban interchange, you could do a doggo roundabout there. You could do a bunch of different things, and so we kind of have to have some reasonable expectation of the scope in order to get a cost estimate. And so it's just stuff we need to build on. So it's sort of the starting point for those. So, and that brings up a good point, though. All the projects that have come forward will be in the long range plan. So they aren't disappearing. They'll be in our long range plan, even if they don't push forward for the state tenure plan. But I forgot, Don, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I have a question that goes back to looking at how we all, and particularly how you looked at clusters of similar types of projects. So as I'm looking at from the local to the regional to the interregional, there's about 7 to 8 projects that are being driven primarily by sea level rise and marshes and other very similar characteristics. So I'm curious how to even be fair across all of those projects so that the priorities are addressed the same. And so how did you, or how do we make the importance equal or fair across all of those projects? It's, to me, I think we have to give these particular projects a particularly important priority, the same, if that's even possible mathematically, but that's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, so I generally split those projects based on the location. So if it was on Route 1, for instance, you know, that sort of fits in the interregional category. And if it's on a smaller state highway, then it's probably in the regional category, although some of the stuff around Hampton Beach or accessing Hampton Beach is kind of critical for the region. So it's kind of make an assessment on that. Those particular projects, and I'll talk about that a little bit.
David, just interjecting, if I may. I was not rectifying or correcting the choice of the level of whether they were local, interregional. So I knew that would have an important, but then in terms of how allocating the resources and or allocating the importance of timing. So.
Yeah, and so in scoring those projects, because those projects all came out of the vulnerability assessment that we completed in 2022, I have a fairly good handle on when impacts will be happening at each of those locations based on, assumptions about future sea level rise rates. So we can say there are certain areas that are going to be impacted at 1 foot of sea level rise. And so those are going to get hit first. And so those kind of get a higher priority from that regard. And so that's how that gets accounted for in there. But then also impacting, some of that is, is it does the roadway, if it's not usable, does it impact access to an area? So for instance, Route 1B in Rye and Newcastle, if Route 1B is flooded, you can't get to Newcastle, right? You can't get onto the island. But if, say, Marsh Road in Rye is flooded, that doesn't really impact anybody because there's nobody who lives directly on Marsh Road that would be impacted, and there's many other ways to get around. So those are the kind of different pieces that we have to look at. And the vulnerability assessment kind of does a good job of laying out the impacts as, stepping through the impacts as you get higher and higher amounts of sea level rise. And I tried to incorporate that into the scoring, but it's rough. And the other issue that we're having with these sea level rise projects, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too, is related to we don't really have a great idea of what the best scope is for these projects. You know, in the vulnerability assessment, we came up with a general, here's a couple of things that you could do here. But when we put one of those projects forward in the last round, DOT poked a lot of holes in that scope and was like, this isn't gonna work and you can't really do it this way. And so I'm a little hesitant to put them forward until we can get a better idea of what are actually workable solutions in each of these situations. You know, in a lot of the other projects, say it's a safety project or a capacity issue, it's you're putting in, you know, some bike lanes, or you're putting in a traffic signal or roundabout or something. It's a fairly straightforward thing, whereas these we're talking about, are we raising roadways? Are we bridging? Are we, you know, redirecting water somewhere else? You know, so there's a lot of complicated issues that relate to each of those sea level rise ones. And so we have to take a little bit more care in coming up with the scope. And that's something I'm trying to work on, is finding some money to do that and make that next step and revisit all those projects and say, well, what can we actually do here? And how much would it cost? So, but I'm not quite there yet. So as we get deeper into this in a little bit, you know, one of the things I'm suggesting is that we kind of hold off on programming any of those at the moment, and we wait and see if we can't find some money to get some more detail on those before we start putting them forward for the 10-year plan.
Okay, well, thank you.
all right.
That's helpful.
Sure.
It's in the chat.
Something to chat. Oh, Eric has to leave for another comment. All right, Eric, thanks. Where are we in time? All right, so a little after. All right, so given that this is really the last thing on the agenda, I have a full hour. Try to be quicker. As I said, all the projects will be included in our long range plan. If, you know, they'll certainly be considered for future cycles of the 10-year plan. And if we have a project that seems to make sense as part of one of the statewide programmatics, the example here is I use the State Aid Bridge Program, we'll put forward for the community to get that, try to get that added into that particular program. And so, you know, we're not just leaving these alone. We do try to revisit them and see what makes sense to get them, try to moving forward as fast as we can. And then projects might also be incorporated into some regional analyses we do, such as a congestion management process. We don't have a huge congestion issue in the region, but we still want to identify areas where there are bottlenecks that we can address. And a lot of those come from these long range plan projects, or identified in the congestion management process and put into the long range plan. Same thing with the safety action plan. Any place in the region where there is a safety issue, we can list it as a project in our safety action plan, which then, you know, makes it potentially eligible to get federal funding to address it. So projects like the South Road in Brentwood is a perfect example of something that might fit well into the safety action plan. Same thing with the Portsmouth Circle, number of projects around the region that I think would be good fits for that program. It might be funded at an accelerated rate because of that. So staff recommendations that I put together and mailed out to you on Tuesday, or had Michaela sent out to you on Tuesday. There are really 3 pieces to that. So I'm recommending that we don't do anything with some of those projects right now. And that's really for 3 reasons. That there's some uncertainty regarding what the scope is, a perceived lack of need, or it's a cost prohibitive project given the $80.1 billion. The other group of projects, the second group of projects, is those that I think we should update. And we had existing estimates either done in 2022 or in 2020 that we can get updated. And get some, you know, sort of refresh that information. I think that can happen very efficiently and very inexpensively. And so there's a handful of projects I'm proposing for that. And then new estimates for the remaining projects. And these would be ones that HTA would go through and work up a full new estimate. So this is the local list that I sent out to you, and my recommendation sort of rank is on the left side. Any sort of cost information I have is in the middle, and my recommendation is on the right side. And so here you can see that I'm recommending that we update the couple of projects first and third. And fifth, ranked projects in the local, and get a new estimate on. The work on 1B in Ryan Newcastle, and a new estimate on Class 121A North Road intersection, and then we hold on the rest. And this is all the information that I sent out to you the other day as well. So, and then at the regional level, similar kind of things, holding on a number of the projects, updating on a couple, updating on one project, the third ranked project in Stratham, and then new estimates for a project in Seabrook, a project in Greenland, which, you know, really isn't a new project. It would be, say, updating the Vanessa and Associates estimate that was done in 2018. And then on Epping, on Route 27, at Five Corners in Epping. You know, and then holding on the rest there. And then finally on the air regional projects, updating the traffic circle one, basically just getting, you know, inflated numbers, new inflated numbers for that. And updating the work that was done for the road safety audit in Brentwood at 125 and South Road, just to make sure that the values match up with DOT's numbers for inflation. Because I don't think they inflated the costs in that one in the road safety audit. And then
I think the RSA provided an estimate. I think I provided an estimate
Okay.
of cost based on a similar
okay,
project.
I thought there was one in the appendix.
Maybe there was and we missed it because
Yeah.
I was rushing. So that would be great if there was.
Yeah, I
Go with
think
that
I
cost.
think there's an estimate for both the intermediate improvements and the
Okay,
long
good.
range improvements in there.
Yeah.
And since it's Hoyle Tanner that did the road safety audit, it should be very quick for them to just make sure that the numbers still make sense.
Yeah,
As opposed to having to redevelop it.
right.
And then doing new estimates at the 101 I-95 interchange, which is actually in Hampton, although I think part of it does straddle it in Northampton a little bit. Really looking at the eastbound off-ramp from 101 to 95. That's been a big priority of District 6 for a number of years, to get dealt with for safety and operational issues. So we'll put that forward. And then this one, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, the very last one, the 10th rate one, the Seacoast Communities. It's basically, this is in the way of the description, but it's from our regional ITS architecture, and it's implementing a traffic management improvements to deal with evacuations. So changeable message signs, you know, planning for conflict flow, things like that, if the coast needs to get evacuated. And that's been floating around for a while, but for whatever reason, the different mix of scoring this time floated that up into the top 10. So I'm not sure quite how we'll scope that and get an estimate for it, but yeah, we'll figure that out.
So the question is 95 and 101 project, where that's 95 is what, isn't it more federal funds?
95 is actually full. So, yeah, I'm not sure how that would get funded, but you know, since 101 isn't part of the toll, and I'm not sure where the toll system ends and where the federal aid system starts there. So I kind of assumed that this part would probably not be part of the toll, but maybe. And, you know, that's something, you know, one of the next steps I need to do is have a conversation with DOT and say, here's the projects we're putting forward to have looked at by our engineering consultant. What do you think about the scopes that we've laid out for these? Do they see any problems with any of it, or, you know, this, you know, that kind of thing?
So when you get on the intersection, you're in the intersection actually approaching the tolls on both sides.
Right.
And you can't get through that intersection without being involved in tolls.
Yeah. And so I think it's probably the off-ramp that is the big issue. So the off-ramp from 101 eastbound onto 95, it's single lane, you get traffic backed up onto 101 as they try to navigate that tight corner. But as you get up around towards the tolls, it expands out a number of lanes. It's only one lane going in, so my thought would be, it might be in sort of an auxiliary lane starting that ramp. So basically you've got a 2-lane ramp that goes around. You know, might be certainly more than that, but that's the sort of the starting point that I was thinking of for that project.
I'm just thinking, if that's available from federal funds, if that could go up, so the funds available on the local projects.
Right, yeah, if that could be toll funded, that would be amazing. But I don't know if that's the case or not. So, but we'll put that out there, you know, if that's part of the toll system, if that's part of the toll system, then, turnpike system, then we would, yeah, absolutely be like, yeah, let's fund this with tolls, don't take our share. I mean, that, you know, that's something that the state should be addressing anyway, because that's a major interchange of two major highways. That being said, there's no real mechanism for them to put those projects forward unless it's part of the toll system, you know, the turnpike system, so. But we'll put it out there and we'll see what they have to say and we'll revise as needed. So, just to kind of compress those three tables into things that maybe you can wrap your head around a little bit more. So these are the projects that I'm recommending that as a starting point that we put forward for updated estimates on. You know, and some of them are ones that we've done previously through this process. You know, the exception to that would be, I mean, you could probably put the Greenland project down here as well and as an update as opposed to a new estimate. But the Brentwood 125 project that's at South Road, that's a road safety audit, was completed earlier this year. There's an estimate done for that. We would just kind of need some updated information, but that wasn't part of our 10-year plan process. The rest of these are all ones that were done through the 10-year plan process. Does anybody have any questions about this list that I'm proposing for updates?
So like the, Portsmouth project with the Maplewood Ave culvert, would that be eligible for any other type of grant program?
It probably is going to be, it's been recommended for the state aid bridge program. But it's one of those ones where I felt like we have an estimate that was done 2 years ago. It can be really cheap for us to just get that updated numbers and it might help the city out a little bit. And maybe it just, you know, gets it under fresh set of eyes. That's a really big project. The estimated inflated cost I put in here is what it would be if it were programmed out at the end of the 10-year plan. So it gets expensive. That's probably too big for our share at this point. You know, because a base cost is like $12 million on that. So that being said, we have an estimate. I think it could be an hour or two of work from Will Tanner to just kind of update the numbers on it. So I'm willing to invest that to just kind of keep these things up to date as best you can.
I have two questions before you move.
Sure.
But we had asked for Blueberry Hill Road to be put under National Highways Transportation.
Highway Safety Improvement Program.
Yeah.
It is in the queue to get a road safety audit along with a dozen or so other locations around the state. I'm just saying that DOT's estimate for that project based on compared to what Hoyle Tanner put together, there was a pretty stark difference in the overall cost. So I would just want to update it to be more so that Hoyle Tanner's estimate would be more consistent with what DOT put forward when they reviewed it. So that's really all. But that's still in the queue for road safety on it. So I would wait on, you know, we might not put that forward as our priority just because we're waiting to see what the road safety audit says. But we'll at least have updated numbers for what we're thinking.
Second question, these say update estimate, and that is one of the update column that you have on here. But there's no mention of new estimates on there. Is there another slide with new estimates or is this it? Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, so, all right, so there's no more questions on those that we're looking to get estimate, or updated estimates on. I'll move forward. This next slide is those that we're looking at getting new estimates. And again, I included the Greenland project on this one. I could have put it in the update one, but it seemed to make sense yesterday afternoon when I was throwing this together, so. So proposing that there are 7 projects here that we're gonna get, we would put forward to have estimates done for. The Rye Newcastle one, this is on 1B. Some of the low spots between one is on Newcastle Island, 2 are actually at Rye. And those were identified in the vulnerability assessment that we did 2 years ago. But they were also included in the analysis that DOT did for the causeway. And they received federal money to do the causeway portion, but they did not receive any money to do these low spots. And so I'm putting forward those other low spots on 1B as a sort of a combined project. It's 3 locations. And the cost that was there, they estimated in the feasibility study for the causeway, that'd be about $1 million to address those 3 spots. I'm guessing that's probably underestimated simply because they were doing a construction project on the causeway already. They're already mobilizing for that, and so the cost of that mobilization are probably included in that part of it and not so much in these add-on kind of areas. So we'll have that estimated independently. I'm guessing that number will go up a bit, but it's basically 3 spots that would have to be raised about 2.5 feet each. Plastown 121A North Avenue. This project is a long-standing project in the long-range plan. It's been in the long-range plan as long as I've been here. There are some moderate congestion issues there, some moderate safety issues. And so we're just putting forward to do an analysis of that intersection to see, whether a roundabout or a signal, I'm not sure which might be the best approach there. Seabrook on 1A. This is another project. This is pedestrian and bike improvements along 1A, basically from the bridge to Hampton down to the state line. It's been in the long-range plan a really long time, and this would be really complementary to the work that's happening both on the Hampton Seabrook Bridge as well as the Ocean Boulevard project. And, if all that were to go forward, we would have bike and pedestrian facilities all the way from the border up through Hampton Beach, through North Beach, all the way to High Street in Hampton, which would be a big stretch of good facilities. Greenland, this is the bridge at Route 33 in Bayside and Winnicott roads. There's actually an estimate done for that by Vanessa Associates for the town in 2018. We basically just updating that estimate to try to make sure that the values that make sense. And this would be sort of complementary to the work that's being done or supposed to be done in the engineering study that's actually in the 10-year plan. So, whether or not we want to move forward with that project to put into the 10-year plan sort of on its own after getting this cost estimate is a question we'll have to discuss a bit. But we can at least have a rough estimate of what that's going to cost going in. So Epping, this is on Route 27 in Epping at 5 corners. And it's basically it's just a very odd intersection of 5 different roads that kind of come together in an odd way. It'd be a sort of a small scale safety and safety improvement, really. It's not a huge safety issue there, but it's enough that it ticked up on the radar enough to drop into the higher level here. Hampton, this is that 101 995 interchange that we talked about, so nothing new there. We do need to sort of nail down what the scope of that project might be exactly. And then the regional ITS architecture project looking at evacuation of the coast routes. That is something we'll also have to sort of figure out what the scope might be. I can look back through the ITS architecture, but that's now 10 and 12 years old. So I just need to really look through that and see what we'd be proposing as part of that. So, and then the remaining project, these are the ones that I'm suggesting we don't move forward with at this point. Most of them are the resiliency related projects. And again, I explained that that's related to us not really understanding and knowing what the appropriate scope is for those. And DOT, like I said, last round, when we put forward one of those projects, DOT was very concerned that the scope didn't take into account a lot of issues that would need to be addressed. And so they thought it needed to kind of go back to the drawing board. But we haven't gone back to the drawing board yet to try to figure out what those appropriate scopes are. And that's what I'm hunting for money to try to find to do that. But I haven't got there yet. There are other projects in this list that are not moving forward for other regions. But a good chunk of them are related to coastal flooding, but there's the Bartlett Street Bridge in Portsmouth. There's really concerns about ownership of that bridge. Part of it is could be federally owned because it was built by the Army Corps of Engineers. Part of it is privately owned. It's more of a platform than a bridge. It's an odd situation where it's kind of a culvert that goes under private property, but is also a bridge on the road, and it goes under like buildings and things like that. So it's a bit of an odd situation. So I'm sort of pushing back and saying, let's hold off on doing that while they sort of figure out what the ownership is. The city of Portsmouth might only be responsible for a very small portion of my bridge. And so the cost that's associated with it is just a few $100,000. But that seems ridiculously low, given that you're dealing with a bridge. So anyways, that has also been put forward for the state aid bridge project program. The reconstruction of Windcunt Road, Hampton, is another one. Reconstruction projects in general are fairly a low priority for the region. Because they're really expensive per mile. And because of that, this is almost a prohibitively expensive project. It would be a, sort of on the order of a $15 to $20 million project, which we really can't afford under our share. Similarly with the Route 1 bypass, northern and southern sections, those would be very expensive projects. We're not getting a big call for the work on that. So, we're sort of proposing to hold off on that. So,
Is it possible to wrap exit 12 into the Hampton project?
it's possible.
They're pretty close together.
They are, they're about a mile apart or so. And it may be that an auxiliary lane would have, potentially would maybe need to go from one to the other to kind of facilitate that. I don't know. We do see backups that approach the on-ramp or the on-ramp for exit 12 eastbound on that on-ramp. So but that's something we can talk about. And I need to have a conversation with both District 6 and DOT Concord to sort of figure out what makes sense. Any questions on this list? Any other questions on that list? So,
Dave, I have a question.
yeah, absolutely.
So could you go back to, so it looks like a lot of those projects, it says DOT raised concern for the scope on coastal flooding.
Yes.
Are they expecting communities to do that?
No. I think it's just, they feel like there needs to be some more work sort of identifying what makes sense to do in those locations, whether it's them doing the work or us doing the work, or the community doing the work. They just, before they say that they want to dedicate 10-year plan funds to addressing it, they want to have a better handle on the scope so that they've been burned in the past with projects where they come in and it seems like a very simple project. And then you actually dig into it and it goes from a $1 million project, say, to a $10 million project, and they don't want to get burned like that. The project that we put forward last round was High Street in Hampton. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The section that runs through the estuary is very low. And so it would need to be raised by several feet to basically stay out of the water. Problem is there are a row of houses right adjacent to the road that are very close, like, 20 feet from the road. And so you raise that by 4 feet and suddenly you've got houses that are driveways that are 4 feet down in a very short time frame. And so it just got very complicated. They're like, this is a way more complicated project than you're saying it is. And so they were concerned about it. In addition to there being sewer lines that run under that and water lines that run under that road. And the concern was if you're adding that much more road over the top, is that creating issues with your buried lines and accessing those. And so they're just like, we don't really want to touch this yet.
Well, that's not a small list. Are they
No.
planning to look at that?
DOT is in the process of developing a resiliency improvement program that would look at some of these locations on the state highways. They're not going to maybe give enough detail, but they're starting to look at it. I am looking for funding to basically, we completed a lot of those projects came out of this vulnerability assessment that we finished 2 years ago. And we came up with at each of those locations, we came up with ideas of what might work, like raising the road, bridging, there are a handful of other things you can do. What we need to do is go back into that study, and that's what I'm looking for money for, and hire engineers and say, okay, what actually makes sense here as a viable alternative, and then come back and list out what those constraints might be, or the issues with houses being very close to it, and kind of really nail down some of that more information. And so that's kind of what I think we should, not saying we need to 100% wait on these forever, because I may not be able to get money to do it in the immediate future, but I think we have to take a step back and look at them a little more closely before we start to program funding for them.
Dave, I have my hand raised. Joe Lynch from Hampton.
Joe. Yep.
So on the Winnicott, what did you say the estimated cost was that you last had on that?
Let me go back.
Did you say 15 million or 17 million?
Yeah, it's in this.
18.8 inflated.
Yeah, so reconstruction of Winnicott Road, so this was something that was submitted by the town, Joe, back at least 10 years ago, it's probably 2013 timeframe, 2012 timeframe.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know what the original scope was back then, but I can tell you that we just completed, literally paving the last section of High Street on our own for a fraction, literally 1/5 of the cost of that 18.8 million and
This is Jen Hale. Sorry, I just got back from another meeting. I'm looking at that Hampton one for reconstruction of Winnicott Road. So I met with DOT last week. This is in there, or 2 weeks ago. This is in their, is this 10-year?
10-year. They're looking to put it on hold.
So-
Recommendation, put it on hold.
So they're actually, when we talked about it last time, it would be breaking it into a phase because we would bring in the Safe Routes to School program and do the complete streets from Route 1 to Mill Road.
Okay,
And they were changing that description and doing the costing. I had sent along the information, so I thought they were moving forward with that. Something that we would then look to put on the warrant for next year because it would take about 2 years for that funding to come in. That was that window.
okay, so that's, sounds like I need to have a conversation with you guys about what DOT's plans are, what your plans are with that safety, Complete Streets project is for Winnicott Road. But this is based on a project that the town submitted, 10 years ago and has been floating in our long range plan since then. There's this one, the reconstruction of Winnicott Road, and it was listed as a full depth reconstruction, like basically rebuilding the road from the ground up. Same thing with High Street and Hampton Road, Exeter Road, Route 27.
Right, so that program as it's been shown right there is
Yeah.
not what the proposed plan is for the money that is in the 10-year plan currently. Or what she had told me was ready to
Yeah,
get
no,
moving.
this is separate from the 10-year plan project, yeah.
So I would
So-
totally say hold because that isn't going to be a project
Okay.
anymore.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
I'll follow up with you guys on that.
All right, and I'll follow up with them too to make sure we're all on the same page.
That sounds great. All right, thank you, Jen. And Joe.
While you're still on that local projects, we just hear from Tim Moore, if he's still on, about the, Glasgow, 121 North Avenue, whether that is still in their, priority list or, if you can have a plan of how they would do that, so, that should be moved to hold or reinvestment, because I don't even know how they would go about doing that, other than signalization.
Yeah, that is a state highway.
So, yeah,
it's-
it's, one is, but
North Avenue is a state highway.
North Avenue.
Yeah, Dave,
Yes.
this is Tim. Yeah, that project is very much on the minds of everyone in Plastow.
Especially during commuting hours,
What's that?
especially during commuting hours.
Well, yeah, right.
Well, the other thing is that, with the Main Street traffic calming project, blast out,
Right, that's what I was wondering.
if you put in a solution at North Avenue that keeps cars moving slowly, say a roundabout, you're gonna sort of facilitate continued slow transition up Main Street.
Yeah.
Which has been a big problem. Speed is a big issue on Main Street, so that's just one thing. That's another reason to look at that. So,
All right, thanks.
yeah. All right, so, we just need a TAC decision on what to put forward for the cost estimates. And then once we get that decision, I will, have a conversation with both HTA to set up a scope of work for them to do, a work order. and then also with DOT to make sure that the scopes that we're putting forward make sense. So that we don't have a mismatch like we got last round where they're like, they basically said to me, why did you scope this project this way? It doesn't make any sense to us. So I'd like to avoid that at the end of the process. And have that conversation at the beginning of the process when we still have time to fix it. So those are kind of the way things go. And then bring that list of estimates back to the TAC in September, hopefully, possibly October, for the TAC to sort of make a final call on what we want to submit to DOT as our draft priorities.
How many of those new estimates and revised estimates do you think we can cover on?
I mean, you know, we have $8.1 million. So we can put in up to $8 million plus 2 projects. So that could be 3. It could, depending on what our top priorities are, right? It could be 3, it could be in previous years, we've submitted as many as 7 projects. And, you know, it depends on the order of things that are priority wise. You know, and so.
No, I meant just the cost of getting the estimates.
We have plenty of money to get the estimates.
For
Yeah.
all these ones.
Yeah.
Okay, that was what I meant. I thought we
Yeah,
had another.
can we afford to just do all of the ones that are recommended, or do we have to?
We
work
can,
it down?
we should be, I haven't costed this out with HTA yet, but given what it cost us last time to do it, we have plenty of money to do that because we have additional funding available. And the numbers for the new estimates are similar to what we asked for last time. I think we got 8 out of them last time for, I want to say $28,000. And I've got roughly 40 to play with this time.
Could we afford to do even more than what's listed, because so many are recommended to hold, or?
It's possible. I mean, we could, you know, we could put together if we have extra money, we could do that kind of thing. I'm not sure which projects would sort of fit that bill though.
Yeah,
That's the hard thing.
do you like expand it to top 15 or something? I don't think.
We did that with the delayed response.
I mean, you know, we do have time limitations, right? They basically got 3 months, 2 to 3 months to kind of pull this together, so I can't throw 20 of them at them. You know, 20 new ones to kind of do, and you know, the reason I felt like we could do the updates were because I was thinking a lot of that would be just very quick for them to just kind of update the inflation numbers, you know, apply the most recent unit costs. And they don't have to rescope it at all. It's the same scope. It's just applying new unit costs and inflation. So it should be a very quick kind of easy thing. Whereas the new estimates, those take some coordination with me, potentially with DOT, and some, you know, reasonable amounts of staff time to kind of pull those together.
If-
So I
if
think
they're
7 or
gonna-
8 of those is probably all we can do. And the updates, we might be able to throw a couple more updates in there if they're on.
If they're gonna actually do that interchange one, that's gonna be time consuming.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, that one I would put that one kind of maybe low on the priority list of ones to, or if they had to cut one, I would say that, or the evacuation route planning one, because that one is even more nebulous than the interchange at this point. But both of them, I think, are reasonable needs. It's just how do we define those needs in the short term here, so.
Well, if we go interchange one, a conversation should be had with what the scope's going to be, because that's gonna impact the cost estimate.
Yeah, absolutely,
In
yeah.
what we're asking HTA to do.
Right, yeah, and my initial thinking on that project is basically an auxiliary lane to get the queue traffic out of the flow of 101 and maybe facilitate an easier movement around up and onto the tolls. So it would be, you know, part of the ramp extending it out to 2 lanes and creating an auxiliary lane for X number of feet. But that's, you know, that's something, and I need to have a conversation with District 6. I know District 6 this has been a major, that interchange is a major thorn in their side. And they're always having to deal with stuff at it, so I need to have conversation with Brad Scott to see what his thoughts are on it, and then relay that and talk with the folks in Concord about what makes sense. So,
If we put forward the intersection of Winnicott Road and Bayside Road, the intersection directly adjacent to the bridge, which is having an engineering assessment done on it in the next fiscal year, are the responses gonna come back so that the intersection assessment and the bridge assessment can talk to each other, or is it gonna be a garbled mess?
well, I mean, this would, what we would be asking for from HTA would be essentially look at the analysis that Vanessa and Associates did and update the numbers for them. That's what I'd be looking for that. And then that would, I would assume, feed into the bridge assessment in terms of understanding of the costs involved, but it probably, you know, it's a very high level planning estimate kind of thing, where it's not going to be as detailed as what might come out of the engineering assessment on the bridge. But it's a starting point, and it gives us a number that we can stick in our long range plan and potentially the 10-year plan that we have to complete too.
Is the engineering assessment on the bridge gonna give us a sense of the costs?
I would hope so. That would be a big reason to do it, would be understanding what that actual scope will be, you know, how long do they need to make the bridge? You know, how wide does the bridge need to be? And the costs that would come with that would be important, because I know if DES is going to fund it through their infrastructure program, they're gonna want to know how much it's gonna cost, so. So I think this is kind of a baby step forward for dealing with that application.
Okay, where's money coming from for the estimates as opposed to the 8 million for the project?
The estimates come from our work program budget. I set aside money for each fiscal year to do this kind of work. Any other questions?
Would it be crazy to propose that, you know, we recommend moving forward with all the ones that have been recommended, see what they come back with for a fee, and if there's a ton of money left, get them under contract for that work and then add an amendment to do a couple more, just, or would you reallocate that budget internally for something else you need?
Probably use it for something else
Okay,
internally. I mean, I don't wanna, you know, my goal is that eventually every project in our long range plan has the kind of level of estimate that we get out of this from that, but
yeah,
I
You think it would be too
spend
much
50
back and
grand on it, yeah.
yeah,
And I won't have time to come, I was hoping to not have a July meeting or an August meeting potentially.
mhm,
So having come back to this group
Yeah.
to talk about, well, you know, here's some others we could do, that just takes that's gonna take
Yeah.
another month. So I would say limit it to these.
Probably waste of money, anything that you've recommended hold, and I can understand on all those, why
Yeah.
they're on hold. So, but as long as the funds, which is what I was asking the question first, to do the estimates and the updates and new estimates. I think we should move to, in fact, I will, we recommend, that all those go to, the contractor for estimates and updates. That's what.
So these are the projects as recommended by staff.
Yes.
So the list of updated, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 updates and 7 new estimates. All right,
And. Without like, first,
if any, we have a motion, we have a second, any questions, comments on that?
David, it's Tanya. Can you repeat that motion, please? It was poorly
All right.
heard. on my side. Sorry.
So the motion was to put forward the staff recommended list of projects to get up both updated cost estimates and new cost estimates for. So on page 2 of the memo that I sent out, or that we sent out on Tuesday, there's a list of 6 projects to get updated estimates and 7 projects to get new estimates for. And that's what was motioned and seconded.
Thank you. Yep.
All right. Any further questions on that? Or comments? Hearing none, look for a vote. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Any
Abstain.
abstentions? All right,
Abstain.
Yep, thanks, Lucy. All right. Thank you, everyone.
prioritizing and getting within the 8.1 million, once we use the estimated costs. Inflated costs from your column there.
We'll have new numbers when you get to that, when we get to that point
Okay,
in the
that's
fall,
fine.
we'll have new numbers for all that. This was just me inflating based on the 3.7%
Right.
and the 10 and
We now, our goal today is to get these prioritized, right?
our goal today is to just say, we're gonna get estimates on these.
Okay.
When we come back in the fall, we'll take a look at those estimates and we'll figure out what our priorities are based on those estimates.
Scoot out, please.
All right, no, that's right.
Thank you.
Yep, take care, Steph.
I've not seen those for a few months.
All right. Good luck. All right, so thank you for that, everyone. I know that was a lengthy conversation again. But we actually do have time, a little bit of time, for agency and community announcements and updates. We'll start with the folks here in the room. We just try to leave a little bit of time at the end of the meeting when we can to if the communities or agencies have to go announcements, they want to make sure that the others in the room are aware of. But we'll start with the folks in the room for that. Anything going on that we need to be aware of from our communities here or coast? You'll like, yeah. Thanks, Brad.
So, year over year, ridership is up around 35% on the system. Yeah.
Find all that.
Well, if you asked me a year plus ago, we didn't operate at the same level of service. We had a lot of service that was suspended because we didn't have enough staff. So we weren't even operating on Saturdays. We started operating on Saturdays mid-May of last year. So, and then we brought other weekday services back, as we finally got to full staffing because we found the point at which our pay and benefits level was attractive enough to bring people and have them stay. So, that's some great news, from us. We've got a lot of things going on that we regularly report out now through a MailChimp email blast. If you're interested in receiving those, drop me a note. I'm happy to add you to the list of folks who receive those. And I think it's informative, way to keep up on things that are going on at Coast. We'll leave it at that.
All right, thanks, Brad. That's great news though, that your ridership's up so much.
Yeah.
Did I get a raise grant for Hampton, Coast Greenway Trail?
Yes, we did. I don't know if that's been announced publicly yet or not, but,
Not like a press release.
okay, oh, you saw a press release, I can say it. So we, had put in for, a grant to do the engineering work on the phase 3 of the East Coast Greenway, which is through the Hampton Seabird Estuary. And we were, it was announced that we were awarded that grant. So we got, essentially $1.5 million to do engineering work on that section of the Greenway. So that was Scott's doing largely, as you might expect. So Scott's had kind of a banner few weeks here of things going right for him. So
Basically involves.
it's the section from through the Hampton Seabird Estuary, essentially in Hampton. And Hampton Falls.
That's the old.
Yeah, the causeway there.
That's
bridge,
the
yeah.
big ticket item.
Yes, exactly. So we're hoping that by doing some of the engineering work, we can accelerate the actual implementation of that project, which is in the 10-year plan. But it is probably underfunded in the 10-year plan, given how expensive everything has gotten and the complications of building in the estuary.
So since you mentioned Scott and things going right, it reminded me that I was going to add that Scott received an award from the Statewide Coordination Council for Community Transportation as a champion for all the efforts he's done over the years, working on community transportation and coordination efforts, both locally or regionally through the Alliance for Community Transportation, the group that Jeff Donald leads at Coast, and then statewide, but honestly, this year.
Nice. Right, yeah, so for those of you that aren't aware, Scott also got the New Hampshire APA Planner of the Year. And he got an award through the RPC as well for regional planning efforts, due to his work on the Greenway and others. So he's had a good couple of weeks. Now he is vacationing in Hawaii at the moment, so he's resting on his laurels a little bit. So,
Good for him.
okay,
Hopefully you're filling up this inbox.
yes, we're trying. He just left today, so it'll be a couple weeks. So, all right, so, I think that was everybody in the room. Folks online, anybody have, announcements? Lucy, do you have anything you want to share from DOT today? No? What about Jack? You, anything from DES?
Not today. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Danya, anything in Raleigh happening?
No, not for today. Thank you.
All right, everybody's just ready to get out of here and talk about. Joe, what about Hampton?
Nope, nothing from Hampton. We're happy as can be.
All right. Good to hear. Tim, anything in Plastow we need to be aware of?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
Just get that North Ave intersection going.
all right, we'll work on that. Amanda, how about Epping? Anything happening in Epping?
It's the center of the universe.
It is the center.
Sorry, it took me a minute to find my unmute. No, we have nothing over here right now.
All right, great, thanks. Lee, I hesitate to ask this, but anything going on with federal highways that we need to be aware of?
Why do you hesitate?
I've heard your project updates before, Lee.
Well, I have nothing for you today except a big
Okay.
congratulations to Scott and everyone else who was involved in that effort. So
All right, thanks.
that's it.
All right, thanks. All right, well, I did not do a product updates memo this time, so you guys don't get to have that piece of paper. Lucky you. Any other items for discussion today? Any comments?
Yeah, Diane brought something up about sea level rise. You mentioned something after that regarding needing some money to do some more work on that, and it seems like something that would be useful would be if all the communities in the seacoast that are subject to sea level rise had a standard way of measuring where they are, where's the sea, and it needs to all be, they all need to be able to talk to each other.
Right.
Because you don't want one surveyor to do it in one town and a different one to do it in a different town, and then find out, oh, the numbers don't match.
Right.
New Hampshire Granite does have overlays for various amounts of rise and where it gets flooded and all that kind of stuff.
Who does that?
New Hampshire Granite, it's a GIS system.
GIS.
Yeah, it's so NH Granite, just Google NH Granite. Sign up for it.
So,
Has for all the data that New Hampshire has. It's like, it's granite, but no, so GRA.
I think that's.
yeah,
The beaches get surveyed every month.
yeah, they get looked at pretty regularly.
And it really, when you talk about when all those projects are involved, because of other reasons, but there needs to be a massive centralized overview of what the response states, not just to roads. I mean, building up roads 2.5 feet in an area that's gonna be underwater. I mean, other than evacuation purposes, you have to have more reason than that just to do it, because otherwise you.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah, there's a lot of projects that we've got listed, and some of them on that list that I was showing you that aren't really. A road project doesn't solve the issue.
Right.
It just disperses the issue. Or it confines it to the houses that are next to the road, you know what I mean? It's, so, you know, around Hampton Beach especially, there's a lot of houses that are gonna get inundated before it gets to the roads. And so, but if the houses are all inundated, what's the point of having the roads there?
Exactly.
So there's some other, you know, that's just an example of an area where a road-based solution may not be the right solution, right? But you know, to your point, Bob, and others, there is some coordination that's starting to occur. There was a law that was passed a year or two ago that basically allows the coastal communities to sort of group together and combine funds. And so we actually started discussions with all the coastal communities in our region to talk about how we can sort of basically work together and coordinate better on all these things, because, you know, while there's the New Hampshire Coastal Program is doing a lot of work, There are a bunch of other smaller groups of people, such as, Shea, which is a Seabrook Hampton Estuary Alliance, and there's half a dozen other groups like that kind of focus on small areas. There's very few that are looking at the big picture and trying to coordinate and trying to find coordinated funding sources and that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what we started working with the coastal communities on. But for the work that I'm hoping to do, I'm looking at the Federal Highways has the Protect program, which is specifically designed for planning and implementing projects to deal with resiliency issues and adaptation to sea level rise and that kind of thing. It's just getting the grant together is an undertaking in itself. And so I'm now just kind of getting to the point where I might be able to do that. And so I'm hopeful that I can start moving forward on that, and maybe in the next year or two get that. And I would fund engineering work, it would fund surveying work to kind of say exactly how high are these roads off the water, and what would we need to do to make sure that they're mitigated at 2 feet of sea level rise or 4 feet of sea level rise, that kind of thing. So, but that's, again, that's the hope. So, all right. Any other comments, questions? Getting you out here 3 full minutes early. Wow. That's for our recent meetings. That is a major improvement.
David?
Hoping to not have a meeting in July. Hoping to also not have a meeting in August, because we've met 7 months in a row now. But it may be that we need to meet in August. I'm not sure at this point, but I'm thinking no July meeting. So enjoy your summer, everybody, and we'll see you the next time we get together. All right, thanks everybody for coming.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.